And welcome to the big carbon debate. And thank you all so much for tuning in. Just to start with, I'm Martin Kersh. I'm Executive Director of the Foodservice Packaging Association, and as always, delighted to have been asked again to co-chair this debate with Jane Bevis, who is chair of the On-Pack Recycling Label, OPRL. Now, we've done a number of these debates over the years, and in normal circumstances, we'd be asking you to bunk up on the cardboard seats to get more of you in, would have those not on seats seated on the ground, and masses of people standing at the back. We would also have the perpetual din of noise from the surrounding stands. So normally it would be packed, hot, sweaty, and uncomfortable. Gosh, I really do. It's such a shame. We really can't have it like that now. And it just, sitting here now just isn't the same. But what is the same is having an amazing organizer in Charlie and an amazing, hugely qualified and greatly respected panel of 5 industry experts. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction to them. We have Robin Clark, who's Global Partnerships Director for JustEatTakeaway.com, covering 4 areas, which includes CSR. Ian Ferguson, who's Environment Manager at the Cooperative Group. Will King, who is founder of leading shaves brand King of Shaves, and no doubt is speaking from his castle, of which, of course, Will is king. Helen McFarlane, Head of Restaurant Sustainability of McDonald's UK and Ireland Supply Chain, and Julian Hunt, Vice President, Public Affairs and Communications, GB at Coca-Cola European Partners. Now, our theme today is, here we go, post-COVID-19, can we and will we build forward towards a greener future? Then underneath that it says, will the global pandemic be an opportunity for brands and companies to change their strategies and do things in a different way to achieve a truly more sustainable future? Or will we want to get back to where we were before the pandemic? So that is a pretty huge theme and has within itself a lot of assumptions and poses many complex questions. So were we going in the wrong direction before the pandemic? Does the pandemic mean the direction packaging was taking pre-pandemic needs to be changed? After all, the government's 4 packaging reforms had all been raised and consulted on prior to the pandemic. Does the pandemic contribute as much to global warming as the public might believe? Did the political and public perspective of packaging change during the pandemic? And I was just in a webinar earlier today, which yes, it did. And indeed, have our priorities changed? So lots and lots of questions here. Now, we only have about 45, 50 minutes. So we're going to invite each panelist, and this is a bit horrible really, to spend 2 to 3 minutes if they can, just to give us their immediate thoughts. So I'll just do this in the order of the list that I have in front of me. So may I ask Robin to go first, please?
Thanks, Martin. Thanks very much for inviting me today. It is an honour. What a question, and great that I get the hot seat first. So we were heading in the right direction before the pandemic, undoubtedly, to answer the first part of the question. And I think there are enormous moves, certainly within our industry, to think about how we can reduce the impact of packaging across the takeaway sector. And what we're seeing is lots of innovation, whether that's technology that's alternate to plastic or other options around reuse and recycling. Everyone here will be familiar with that, but I think what's really exciting is that innovation is finally coming to a place where we're starting to see samples, production samples ready to go. And I believe that once we come out of the pandemic, that we'll start to see a lot more of this scale up and to make a real difference to the way that we are, to the way that we trade in the industry. There's a couple of reasons why I'm so optimistic. firstly, I suppose if everyone's by now seen Attenborough's latest gift to us on Netflix, and the optimism at the end of it is very simple and very real. If you listen to other people far wiser than me, Alan Jope would talk about the generation consumer behaviour change. Baby boomers don't really accept that sustainability drives a consumer choice. Gen X believe that sustainability does affect, but they don't really act on it. Generation Y do make choices on sustainability, but Gen Z, it's the only issue. So I believe that demography, if nothing else, will move us very hard. I think the other point that he would also raise is that the pandemic's given us a really vivid picture of what happens if we don't all act together, and the positive way that, for instance, food waste has been reduced heavily during the pandemic. And I think he also talks about plenty of indications that consumers are voting with their feet and moving towards brands that have a clearer and more believable sustainability focus. So I think that it will improve. I think that we know what the answers are, and I'm optimistic.
So thanks, Robin. So can I now move on to Ian, please?
Yes, thank you for asking me to join this panel. It's very exciting. I can say that while COVID has created huge disruption in our business, it hasn't stopped our ambition to improve sustainability and recyclability of packaging. Much of our work's been put on hold under COVID, and our targets have slipped somewhat, but we're still determined to press ahead. WRAP have told us, WRAP have reported that customers have wasted less food in the early phases of the pandemic, adopting an average of 6 positive behaviours, and this is really important. But in the later stages of the pandemic, those behaviours have slipped and food waste has started to increase. So we need to find ways to embed those positive behaviours and make them into a habit for consumers. That's one of the most important things we can do, leaving aside the whole packaging debate. Under lockdown, we found that customers have generally bought more pre-packed food. It's, I think most people have found this, and that means more packaging, and more packaging for customers to notice and to worry about, if not complain about. So that means it's imperative that we press ahead with reforms of the packaging system, the waste management system, to a system which all packaging is designed for recyclability, and the waste management system accepts all that packaging, all those packaging formats. But it has to be a partnership and a progression towards a circular economy. So it's not that we've done anything particularly wrong leading up to the pandemic, but we need to press ahead with those actions even faster than we were before.
Thank you very much, Ian. Now, Will, if we may bring you in now.
Yeah, for sure. Good afternoon, everybody. So it's like this: if we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got, which kind of hasn't worked out so well in the last 30, 40 years. You probably saw in the Times today the report via Ellen MacArthur's Circular Foundation that each of us is responsible on the planet for about a ton of plastic, largely produced in the last 50 years. And wouldn't it be wonderful if genuinely recyclable recycling facilities existed to deal with that, as I think they were designed to do back in the 80s and 90s. But sadly, no investment made in that. Big FMCG companies moved to plastic because it's so wonderful, and we've been using it for 25 years. But sadly, in our industry, 120 billion items are produced each year, and around about 70% of that ends up in landfill. So if we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got. So irrespective of COVID, and plastic is not bad. It's got extraordinarily important uses in the world, but not in single-use packaging. We, a couple of years ago, shifted King of Shaves in our Code Zero Move to Metal project. So we're going into lifetime use refillable containers with the refills made out of a single laminate PP substrate. A lot of challenge developing that, but it's led to an 84% plastic redux. And then going forwards, if we don't change our behavior and message out to consumers what we're doing and why, we're just going to have the same old problems coming down the track. And having a 21-year-old son who's Gen Z, and I'm a Gen X guy who's kind of acting on it because I guess I kind of can as a company founder. We've got to change things up, and we're walking the talk. I'll come back to it later. What we're doing in terms of creating an FMRCG category, fast-moving, refillable, renewable, recyclable consumer goods. But we've got to get on and change something up here. Otherwise, it's going to be abject coming out of COVID into 2021. That's my point of view.
Okay, Will, thank you so much for that. Now, Helen, if we may bring you in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Martin, and thanks very much. It's always good to be on a debate which you're chairing. So in terms of so where we're at, I mean, my job in McDonald's is to make sure that we can be a more sustainable throughout our business. But in terms of where we are with packaging, our strategy hasn't changed from where it was before COVID. So we're still aiming to make all of our packaging reusable, recycled, or renewable materials, and to all be fully recyclable at the end of its use. So that hasn't changed. But I guess the pace and some of the priorities have changed from COVID. So at the moment, as a business, our biggest priority is obviously the safety and well-being of our people and our customers and our local communities, which is a huge responsibility with hundreds of thousands of employees and 4 million customers a day. It's not one that we take lightly. But we are seeing out of that, there has been, I think, a change in mindset to the single-use disposable packaging, which of course is the premise of our business model. So people are more comfortable about using single-use at the moment because they feel that it's more hygienic. But that in itself is creating lots of issues. And the biggest one that we're obviously seeing at the moment is litter. So that combined with the use of a lot more single-use masks and gloves and etc. and all the PPE that's coming out of COVID is presenting us with more issues that we wouldn't have seen before. But obviously the litter problem is one that's been around for years. So I guess there's a few areas that are sort of not diverting us, but making us think slightly differently about packaging. So one being the fact that, whilst I totally agree with Robin that, Gen Z customers or Gen Z people are sustainably minded, they are all very financially driven at the moment. I think that applies across the board, that lots of people unfortunately have been severely impacted by COVID in terms of their jobs and lifestyles. So there's a lot more focus on financial rewards. There's a lot of looking at businesses to have the answers and to take up the cost of any kind of changes. And obviously we're seeing that in regulation as well. I am very optimistic coming out the other side. I think there's loads of work going on in this space. There's lots of packaging innovation. There's lots of discussion around reuse. And I think once we've got over the fear of the hygiene element of COVID, we can all step back safely into the reusable space, but just understanding that may be a slightly different space to the one pre-COVID. So thinking around how reusables fit in and in all aspects of what we do. So I think how can we make it safe and convenient for people to reduce the single-use packaging, both in our stores, in our delivery is going to be a big challenge for us because we're seeing that obviously has taken off a lot more during COVID. So that would be one for us to think about. But yeah, generally I'd say I'm also in an optimistic space, but we need to just navigate our way through the next few months, hopefully few months. Yeah.
Okay, good to see some continuing optimism. Julian, if we can now bring you in.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. And I'll probably echo some of the optimism. I mean, look, the pandemic's been hugely disruptive to everybody, and like other businesses here, we spent a lot of this year really focused on how we protect our people, how we help our customers in the trade, particularly HoReCa, through this really painful time. The role we can play in communities, and also making sure we don't take kind of short-term decisions that harm the long-term future of the business. But at no time have I seen us diminish really the focus on sustainability. In fact, if anything, we've continued to really show our commitment to changes. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we announced we completed the transition for all of our PET bottles to 50% rPET, for instance. Just one of the things we've done. We also during the pandemic announced the partnership with Loop, a kind of really interesting online platform to allow us to test consumer acceptance of new packaging models, refillable, returnable packaging models. So we've kept going through the pandemic. And in fact, just today I was on our kind of annual supplier conference. So 200 of our key strategic suppliers talking about the business and how they can work with us. And it was all focused on sustainability. And it was all themed around climate change and the role that we need to play together to address the climate crisis that all of us recognise. So it's not gone off the radar. If anything, I see it's wider than just a green recovery through the pandemic, and continuing now is businesses of all sizes have to be clear around the role they play on supporting social mobility and equity in what I think we all recognise is going to be a really difficult economic situation that's not going to encourage either of those things as we go through the rest of this year to next year. It's going to be about making sure we don't let up the focus on health, making sure that we've got the right range of products so that people can make the right choices for them and their families and keep the work on sugar reduction. But yes, for us, packaging and carbon reduction are absolutely key areas of focus, and we're going to keep really trying to drive that agenda within our business with our suppliers as well. So looking ahead, I think the common theme you're hearing from all of us is it's not going to be business as usual. I think we all get that. And they are, increased expectations around plastic, around packaging, around carbon reduction, around sustainability across our supply chains, health and wellness, and, just as important, fairness and opportunities in society.
Thank you very much, Julian. Now, I know Jane is itching to sort of pull all of that together as a sort of interim summary before we get on to some questions. And I do hope we have some questions coming in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Yeah. And thank you to all our panelists there. So just to help you focus on some areas that you might wish to ask questions on, what I took from those fine, beautifully crafted, bite-sized summaries there was that the drive to sustainability continues, that the pandemic has thrown up some new challenges, paused some work, partly because we know that in some packaging providers, they've had to divert activities into other areas rather than some of the R&D. But we are now starting to see solutions come through. I think the focus that when we've had this conversation just before lockdown, back at the end of February at the NEC, seeing reusable and refillable as being quite a significant part of the answer, we now have new challenges as to how we can make that come to be. Certainly in terms of, us handing our coffee cups across to be filled in store, for example. But we're also seeing some new solutions come online that could, in the same way that the old milk bottle offering used to deal with the hygiene aspects when that was collected, perhaps models like Loop offer us some solutions there. So opportunities, challenges, a lot of work being done over what consumer expectations are. And I looked at a few surveys, and there are endless surveys in this area. And I think we have to take account of when those questions were asked of consumers during the pandemic, because I think probably attitudes changed throughout that period. But changes to the whole way we live our lives, and therefore the way we consume products and how they need to be delivered to us. So Kantar's survey showed that 62% of people are expecting more flexible working in future. Santander, working with their SME client base, a third of SMEs are expecting their employees to work remotely more than they have done in the past, and a quarter of them expecting more of their business to come via online purchases. Ipsos showed that 57% of consumers want to avoid over packaging and 49% expect to be able to recycle more. But actually, when they looked market by market, in the UK, price remains 3 times more important than eco-friendly packaging to consumers. Now, that's not split by the demographic that Will flagged, and that will be a very different priority for different sorts of consumers. So I think that is an important point. But given that, a lot of companies, even those who've successfully sustained sales throughout the COVID pandemic, have also seen a significant rise in costs and therefore squeezed margins. I guess my first opening question to the panel would be, if consumers are still concerned about price, and you're operating with a squeezed bottom line there, what's the reality of being able to deliver sustainability when, in most cases, consumers are expecting you to handle those problems for them rather than for them to radically change their own behaviours?
Golly, right. Did you have anybody in mind to kick this off, Jane?
Well, I guess, you know,
6 very
Helen,
fine people here.
in real time, what sort of feedback are you getting in store? What is the feedback you're getting from your consumers?
Jane, was that to me? Sorry, I missed the start of that. Did you?
So, well, I just thought you were probably right at the front line there, Helen, particularly with the demographic of consumers who are both facing a squeeze on their incomes, but also very concerned about this as an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and interestingly, we literally just ran a survey about, because we've just launched a partnership with Loop as well. So we just announced a partnership with Loop, and we are looking at Loop as being a great option for our customers to have the option of using a reusable cup, but without having to carry one around with them, and without having then to make our employees have to handle, you know, dirty cups. So we think this is a really good option, but when we put it out to our customers, they're interested in us doing it, but only if we're going to offer a discount. So it's not that, you know, even the sustainably minded amongst them said that it would only be of interest if we were going to offer a discount to them. So it's certainly, you know, I know that's only a small piece that we've done, a small piece of insights, but it was louder than we expected in the answer. In terms of, you know, in terms of cost, obviously we're doing a lot of things at the moment to help customers out, and we've reduced prices in certain areas to help customers out, because we know that there's a lot of people who are reliant on value at the moment. Really, I would say value is really strong. Yeah, so that's my short answers to that, Jane. I don't know if anybody else wants to pitch in.
So Robin, I mean, you must have seen a...
Sorry? I missed the end of the question.
I think...
Can you hear me?
I think we've lost
Martin?
Jane's sound, actually. I can hear you, Robin,
That's okay.
but I think we lost Jane's sound.
So,
but I think,
if
you could just pick up the theme. Thanks.
Sure. I think it's a great question, and I think it ignores the bigger picture. And I think it's really important to recognize that. The idea that we can continue to ignore these issues because customers are worried about price is completely missing the long-term trend of where this conversation is going. If you look at the taxes, the regulatory environment that we're operating in, governments want to tax this area. They want to get rid of it. I've sat in number 11 with Phil Hammond saying, why can't I just tax that plastic box into obliteration? Those were his words directly. And now, of course, we argued him off the cliff edge because we didn't have alternatives at the time. When we look across all of our different markets across Europe, different countries are making moves much, much faster. The Dutch countries, the Dutch have made massive strides towards reducing food waste by amazing vertical indoor farming because their government is much more aligned towards this. And so we cannot just look at packaging on its own and think it's a cost issue. You're going to have to re-engineer your business model to think about how you move to a more sustainable business model, because looking at this issue as a one solo issue doesn't work. It's not going to solve the problem.
Jane, are you back in the room? Yes, please, Julian. All right.
Sorry, Jane.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to build. I was just going to build on those themes. Yes, we look at next year, and absolutely, affordability is going to be critical for consumers as we move into 2021. But I like that point about businesses, forward-thinking businesses can't lose sight of the kind of direction of travel and where we're going to be in the longer term, and you've just got to start preparing for that. And yes, I think I agree. Some of that will be perhaps driven by regulation, and we've within the packaging space seen a lot of regulation of late. But actually, some of it will be done by the need to respond to emerging consumer trends that are starting, I think, to really hard bake into buying decisions. And then some of it is because it's the right thing to do. And oftentimes, when you say that from a big corporate, you get kind of wry smiles on the face of people listening to you. But actually, the interest from the investment community in businesses that are building and changing their business models to be more sustainable, the rise of the ESG movement. If you're not there, if you don't have a committee on the main board focusing on sustainability like we do, then you're going to be in trouble. If you don't have your long-term investment plans with sustainability metrics built into them like we do, and if you're not basing your investment decisions on sustainability criteria with bonds that have very strict targets in them around sustainability, then you're really going to struggle. So I think you have to completely have the right mindset that it's obvious the direction of travel. Good businesses are now trying to work out how to get there, and it's just navigating through the current choppy waters, but you know where you're headed.
Can I come in, Martin?
Jane, I think is.
Yeah, well, I was coming to you, Ian, but I was just going to ask Will from a non-food product. I hope that's not me. From a non-food product, you've made this change, and I was wondering what sort of reaction you were getting from your consumers, and whether you were seeing any demographic differences in that.
Yeah. Okay. So we've had our refillables and refills in store in the majors now for about 3 months, and it's been great. Loyal people who've already bought us stock up with a refill or two at the get-go, which has surprised us, to be honest with you. Bit of a downside is the input cost of goods on the refillable are higher, aluminium and pump, but the cost for the refills are lower. And it's been more about getting the big retailers, Waitrose, Boots, Sainsbury's, etc., to put the refills alongside the refillables. So think a razor and blade and a razor handle, but they've been great at that. Okay, so absolutely hats off to them. But what we're looking at doing is going further with this lifetime use refillable positioning, is getting rid of plastic. I mean, this is a deodorant. I'll cover up the brand in total so you can't see it, but this is all plastic. It carries a deodorant. It's a single purchase. It will likely end up in landfill. What we're looking to do is we have a beautiful biocompostable, degradable refill that we spent 18 months developing. That goes into a beautiful aluminium holder that you buy and retain for life. And then when you use the refill up, it goes in with your food waste compost or industrial compost, and then you refill your beautiful container. And there's lots of product initiatives and verticals that we're putting into those around a new company that we created earlier this year. So the loop method, which is very similar to ours, apart from you rent Tom's containers, you never own them, and you refill them, but you pay a small amount to rent them. We're all about lifetime use ownership of beautiful, durable aluminium and other unplastic substrates that can get us out of the whole plastic buy use bin and more into a genuine lifetime use recycle refillable positioning. And the appetite for it from the investors we're talking to, the retail partners, is at least you're doing it, Will, but also we've got to get the cost of goods and the retail price down, okay? Because there's so much of this that's so expensive that people buy it. It's for people who've got lots of money. We've got to be price competitive with a Deo to Sure, Right Guard, etc., or a lip balm with Nivea or Libello. So that's the main thing. But we've made huge investment in manufacturing, technology, engineering. And our biggest gripe at the moment, there isn't an OPRL code, I understand, for the biodegradable compostable substrate that we're hoping people will put in with their food waste, my managing director tells me. So I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I'm just putting it out there.
It is true, but we are working on it with BBIA, and one of the key issues actually is the infrastructure to cope with it, because at the moment most local authorities do not want to see that in their food waste, which is the right moment to hand over to Mr. Schofield, I think, who knows an awful lot about this issue. But I just wanted to ask Ian, obviously the co-op has a unique relationship with its membership, and you get a lot of feedback on their concerns on these sorts of issues. Now, have you seen any changes in what you're hearing from them?
James, Ian Ferguson, not Ian Schofield?
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yes, well, our members set our direction of travel because they are in our business, and they clearly tell us very clearly and loudly that they want us to improve the sustainability and recyclability of our products. So we have to do that at the same time as facing into the potential for recession in the next year or so. However, the fiscal landscape, which has been mentioned by a few people, tells us that we face into higher costs if we don't do something, much higher costs, because we'll end up paying the full net cost of recovery, which is set to be something around about 8 times the current cost of PRNs. So we are preparing for that. We've been preparing for that a long time, because it's the right thing to do, but also because we can see the writing on the wall. So, you know, we absolutely have to make things more recyclable, and we have to work with the local authorities and the waste management companies to design the system so that it will accept all the things we need to put on the market and remove all those things that we cannot say are recyclable, which is what we've been working with you on, Jane, a lot with the labelling. To Will's point on his refill that's compostable, I really can't see local authorities accepting that in the short term. We still have an uphill battle getting some local authorities to accept our carefully designed and carefully labelled compostable carrier bags, which are clearly designed to replace the liners that are used for food waste collection, which are in there. They are single use, whereas the compostable carrier bags have 2 uses. So there's a lot of things to be done with waste management before we can actually move forward.
Well, that's depressing.
I don't know. I think that came from Will,
happening.
actually. That's good. We're getting a little bit of cross debate here, which is good. Jane, do we have any questions from the public?
We don't seem to have any questions coming in. They're obviously so in awe of what they're hearing. They haven't got time to type any questions.
Well, they must type in some questions. What a lost opportunity. But a couple of things which have come up here, which I think are quite interesting. And, you know, we're talking, you know, the whole thing about building back better and all of this, which keeps coming up so much, which has probably soon become a cliche. So if we're going to build, in inverted commas, sustainability back better, I can hear from some of you it's about recycling, and then I hear about biodegradability and compostability being almost used in the same, to almost mean the same thing, which obviously they're not. I mean, are we saying that both are part of the solution, or all of those are part of the solution, or is there, or is this really about what we were about before, which is increasing the amount of recycling which is available? I mean, this is an old argument which keeps coming up over and over again, but I think it's worth just talking about the sort of, if you like, the menu items which are on offer if we're building back better. Anybody care to
my
pitch
point
in
of
here?
view is we've got to start producing less plastic. Okay, whatever happens, it's got to be produced for the right reason. But 8 billion tons out there, and it's out there, and we know the impact of Blue Planet, and we know what's coming down the track. So anything that is alt petrochemically derived plastic, I think, is good, whatever that might be.
I would build on Will's point, as he very kindly did on mine before. This idea that we can just keep producing more and more, and the idea that a circular economy is going to be the silver bullet, I think that idea is beginning to lose some of its appeal. We all know the numbers. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation will tell you 7% globally of our waste is recycled, that's sent to be recycled. In the UK, that's around about a 40% number, and we're pretty good at doing it. We've invested pretty heavily at Just Eat in alternative packaging. We're some of the first people to think about using natural packaging to mimic the same properties of plastic. I mean, my simple question is, why does that take a tech platform to do some of that research, and we don't see that coming from the industry? So that's a big ask from me, is that I would just want to see more and more solutions. I want to see more reusable solutions. I want to see alternative packaging that is not plastic. And we will launch it. We will subsidize it. We will invest in it. But it's been slow to come.
So while we fully in favour of refill, and we need to explore that, while we're interested in alternative materials to put on the market, we absolutely have to make sure that whatever we put on the market fits with the waste management system. And if the waste management system isn't ready to accept a compostable refill for a deodorant, then in my view, it shouldn't be on the market.
It shouldn't be on the market.
It's just got to go to landfill. Will
keep it up?
It's got to landfill or incineration.
Well, at least it will eventually biodegrade and compost in landfill rather than hanging around for 500 years like a bit of plastic.
I doubt it will biodegrade in landfill, because landfill is anaerobic, and compostable packaging is designed to biodegrade in anaerobic
anything that doesn't come from a fossil fuel that's made out of grass or wood or a plant derivative has got to be better than petrochemically derived plastic. Okay, that's my absolute point of view on that.
I don't know what your material is made from, and it may be that it could go into a different recycling stream than the one you think it should be in.
I think it's a brilliant debate, and let me provide a slight, because we've come up against this a million times. And I think if we don't allow innovation to come through, even if it's not fit for purpose for today, then we will never get out of this solution. And we all know the Einstein quote: if you keep doing the same thing again, you're going to get the same results. And if you take the natural packaging that we've been working on, DEFRA don't know how to deal with it. It's not in their consultation. But we've been talking to them about how we can work on that and include it. So there you go. My 2 pence on that debate.
I completely agree. No, I completely agree, Robin. And I think we can't stand still. You can't let the packaging be dictated by these long-term contract waste authority, local authority contracts that we have in place, just so we all design packaging that are going to fit into the status quo, because then we're never going to progress, and we're never going to, get anything new. Exactly like you've all been saying. I think it's all about challenge, and I think we need to challenge the waste companies to take more. We need to challenge ourselves to create the infrastructure if it's not there in the moment, and we need to challenge our customers, in all honesty, our consumers. I think, Robin, where you said earlier about it's all about the longer term. We can't be driven by cost at the moment. You're absolutely right, but it's a bit chicken and egg in terms of do we set the behaviour standards? Do we all do what Will's doing at King of Shaves, and do we all move to that reusable packaging, and we
Yes.
just bring the customers on that journey with us? Absolutely. There will be a cost to that, and there will be a cost to business. No. But we'll have to do that eventually. We need to set that journey and set that pathway and bring them along with us, because at the moment, nothing is going to change if we just carry on doing. We'll just recycle what we're allowed to recycle, and the rest of it is going to have to go to incineration. Or you can't put that in that bin. Well, let's create that. We create that infrastructure whilst we are getting rid of all of the packaging that we absolutely don't need, and bring them on the journey with us. It's the same with. Sorry, I have to go back to litter just because but it is it's because we have all this packaging and people just throw it out the windows and decide that's okay. They can all sit there demanding that we're more sustainable and demanding that we have the answers and we come up with all of this, and yet people are obviously happy to litter because the litter problem hasn't gone away in the last God knows how many years. So we challenge the behaviour of those consumers, we challenge the behaviour of the waste authorities and local authorities, and in the meantime, we create that change ourselves. So we create the infrastructure and we create the new or the lack of packaging so that we can get rid of all these problems.
And I
So
think,
Julian, I think you should come in.
Sorry, just jumping in and kind of navigating through the middle of all of that. I think it's going to have to be a bit of all of that. The exciting thing is that right now I feel there is more desire from the users of packaging represented on this panel to innovate and try new things. So in our market, that's thinking through packaging free, turning back the clock and thinking about refillables and returnables, trying to find innovative ways of self-pouring beverages. I mean, there's a whole mix of interesting innovation going on in the drinks category, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we also have to manage the packaging that we still use and will probably still use. I mean, aluminium cans are still going to be a big part of the drink sector. PET probably is. Glass definitely will be. And there are changes afoot. And if I've got one plea on this, as I say it on every platform I have right now, is if you're involved in the beverage sector, DRS is coming. It's going to happen in Scotland in the summer of 2022. Please, everybody, you've got to get focused on that and get ready, because it will, I think, drive positive change in the medium to long term. But if you're not ready, whether you're a producer, a user of packaging, or a retailer, it's going to be hugely disruptive. So this could be a good thing. This could be a model that works. This could pave other models around refillables, but only if the industry gets ready, and it ain't ready.
I'm advised that lots of questions have been asked, but they haven't been coming through.
No, so Charlie has been sending me pictures, so it's probably easiest if I read out some of what we've got. One from Rodney Steele is, plastic is a fantastic material. Is the panel disregarding investment in plastic recycling in favour of dashing towards other materials such as aluminium?
Who would like to start this one rolling?
Sort of building on that investment point, I think, is with extended producer responsibility coming in, if producers are funding 100% of how we deal with the problem, shouldn't producers call the shots as to where that investment goes?
I think this is one for Ian to start.
So shall I do the second bit first?
Yeah, probably.
The idea of extended producer responsibility is for net full cost recovery. So that means that the easier your packaging is to recycle and the better value it has at the end of the recycling process, the lower cost you should pay. So that's, to some extent, we should be calling the shots, but to a large extent, the market is going to call the shots for us. That's plain and simple. On aluminium, aluminium is a great material for some things. It's fantastic for the aerosol that Will's using. It's not good for putting steaks in or pasta in. So it's also for courses on materials.
Okay, anybody wish to add to that? Julian, I can sort of see your body language even from here.
I always say that, as a business, we're agnostic on packaging materials because our heritage is in glass bottles like the one pictured on the wall behind me. Our biggest pack format is aluminium cans here in GB. We use a lot of PET as well, but also about 13% of our volume is packaging free. It's dispensed. It's through Helen's outlets. It's through restaurants, through pubs. So we kind of have a view across all the different packaging formats. The consumer, yes, is going to drive some of that, but I can see them all in the short term playing a key role.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add to this one, or do we have another question?
I guess my only quick
Robin.
response. No, that's fine. I guess my only quick response is that in the long term, you can easily see something like a carbon tax becoming part of the landscape, and that we'll have to think much more widely about the impact of our overall activity. So LCAs, an understanding of your lifetime carbon footprint of packaging will become part of the thinking. And I would just encourage that deep thinking before we rush to something that might be worse.
So actually, Robin, that picks up nicely on a question we've had from Sally Becken about we need LCAs to back up our claims in this space.
Hello, Sally. She taught me about it.
Had an interesting presentation at the Plastics Pact Summit last autumn, which did a meta survey on LCAs, which showed that you could find an LCA that proved anything you wanted to prove, just by selecting the right one. So how do we make LCAs actually work for us?
Wow. And if that's based on anybody's experience of LCAs, would it be even better? Actually, out of the 6 of you, has anybody conducted an LCA? Julian must have done. That's a silence I think we're getting here.
Yeah, and I'll echo the silence. Not an expert, not an area of expertise for me. We have brighter people in our business doing all of that. I think, though, the point here is that understanding your end-to-end carbon footprint is absolutely critical, because packaging and carbon, I think the point's well made. They are inextricably linked. In a business like ours, up to 50% of our footprint is the end-to-end life of packaging that we use. So we need to understand that. We need to understand the impacts of our actions, and then we need to understand, where our carbon emissions come using the kind of scope 1, 2, 3 methodologies to again take action. I mean, we were telling our suppliers today on that global summit, 90% of our emissions are in scope 3. So we need to work with all of our suppliers in order to achieve our kind of pathway towards net zero carbon emissions. So it's a complex area, but I think, yes, you do need to understand what you're measuring. Yes, I think you've got to have the right methodology. And yes, you've got to have a clear plan for working with your suppliers to get your carbon footprint down, and packaging for us will be an absolutely critical part of that going forwards.
So do we need a standard for LCAs so that we can compare like with like?
Yeah, that could be a new project for OPRL, I think, Jane, in terms of coming up with we just had an MBA student from Exeter University working with us exactly in this space, looking at the LCAs for packaging, looking at how many exist and how you can possibly compare like for like when there's so many different ones. And one of the things that they came out with was, well, it depends. It depends what you want to see in your outcome. It's not, obviously just about the carbon footprint of any different material. It's about, when it's the capacity of it, when it's likely to come to market, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're looking at different materials to compare with, if we've got plastic cutlery now, what do we move to in the future? Is it wood? Is it paper? Is it, fungus based? and you have there's loads of different factors to take into consideration. So yes, in a short answer, Jane, I think we need a standard LCA, but that the companies can use to their own means. Yeah.
I would.
Jane?
I would just. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say there is an ISO standard for running LCAs already, but the problem with running LCAs is that within a few years they're out of date, because one of the big impacts is the energy mix, and the energy mix has changed. Another big impact is the waste management mix, and as you know, the waste management mix has changed over the years, with more and more councils accepting pots, tubs and trays for recycling, and that changes the LCA completely.
It's a brilliant point, Ian. I just if anyone wants to start looking at LCAs, what we've used is heat mapping LCA, which is a very light touch version, much cheaper, and it gives you an idea of your comparable to different packaging or different materials. And then if you want to read a book, just read the banana book. How about a bananas? It's a great way to get into this.
Yes, it's a great idea, Robin, to have a lower cost, faster, more agile LCA that can respond to changes with time much more cheaply.
And just do what Brewdog are doing and plant a lot of forests and get your tribe on board in terms of putting a lot more out there, maybe.
Right. Right. A question for you all now is we've got to think about, if we're going to make these things happen, we've got to think about public participation, getting the consumer to do the right thing, whether it's the government reforms, putting the right things in the right bins, whether it's some of the systems, for instance, that Will's been talking about, getting people to work, and Helen, getting people to work with systems and also meet the requirements of using those systems as well. Do you think the pandemic has made the public more inclined to get involved and play their part and ensure all the reforms which we're going to be seeing over the next few years are successful, or do you think it's perhaps not even made the blindest bit of difference? Would anybody like to leap in on that one? Or else I'll have to pick someone. Helen, you've done some research. Is the public more engaged with this now? Are they going to play their part? Are they going to be even more inclined to put the right things in the right bin?
No, I don't think so. I think the public got very engaged after Blue Planet. I think David Attenborough always, tugs at the heartstrings and gets people, in the best way. I love David Attenborough. I think he's brilliant. But I think things like that are more, tugging at public sentiment, people then feel that they want to do the right thing and they will do the right thing. They don't, unless you make it super easy or you fine people, or there's got to be a carrot and stick. But I think if you incentivize the right thing, and you have to make it absolutely easy for them to do it, otherwise no, I don't think the pandemic's made any difference.
Made no difference. Anybody else like to pitch in there? Ian, co-op customers, they're always very engaged.
Well, I would say that two things. One is that DRS that Julian's mentioned is actually going to drive proper behaviour change in that space, and that will make a difference. With a bit of luck, that will help to embed good recycling behaviour in other areas. What we have seen is that on carrier bags, we have seen under the COVID, under the initial lockdown, certainly there was no increase in single-use bag use, which meant that our customers were continuing to buy into the idea of reuse. And that was in the face of our increasing sales because more people were using convenience stores. So there is some evidence for customers doing the right thing. Whether all customers do that is open to debate.
No, Will, you haven't been silent at all during this, so I'm sure you've got some thoughts about the public.
No. Look, we bought and we've used and we've binned, okay? That's what we've kind of done all my entire adult life, born in the 60s and seen this plastic increase. And clearly that has to change, but it can't change at more cost to the consumer. that this is the macro issue. Doing this, it's more expensive for us to do. But what I'm hopeful is people will see what we're doing and buy into us over a lifetime of refills. Going forwards, the initiatives, whether it's the TerraCycle Loop one, with rent the container and refill it, what we're trying to do in old plastics, whatever we do, it cannot be more expensive. You only have to see the ASOS numbers today in terms of their quadruple profitability, because they're selling ton loads of cheap stuff online in the fast fashion space, and it can't be more expensive. So it has to be clever and innovative and forward thinking, and that's kind of where we are as a brand and a business, and I am as an individual.
Right. And Julian?
I was on mute. Just again echo what people have already said. I think it's changing consumer behaviours is a long-term thing. The beverage industry have got a kind of extraordinary moment here in the UK coming up, as Ian referenced, that will be a massive change to consumer behaviours, and we've got to make sure that that is a success. It's a big challenge for us, and it will be a challenge for consumers. I think consumer awareness of the issues has definitely risen. The Blue Planet effect, yes, but I think it has stayed with consumers. There is more interest. There are signs of changing behaviours, and we're seeing that in other aspects of life as well. The growth of veganism. As a vegetarian for 30 odd years, I've gone from being a freak to being the norm, which I'm really quite happy about. So we are seeing across lots of spans of consumerism, there are definitely changes, and they are definitely taking root, but it will be slow, and it will need incentives, and it will need possibly the stick occasionally. My biggest bugbear in life is litter. I can't stand it. I love walking, spend my life walking. The things I hate most, probably seeing some of my brands littered in cans or plastic bottles, drives me mad. Second only to plastic bags full of dog shit hanging in trees, and plastic face masks littered everywhere I go walking. So how we tackle the litter thing, I think, is a stick moment that we've got to get right. How we change behaviours is bringing consumers with us, making it in a way that makes sense and isn't necessarily expensive. We've got to take consumers with us going forwards.
And Robin, has the pandemic made the consumer more likely to come with us?
We've certainly seen consumer change. I'm not sure how long-lasting that is in terms of sustainability. I think the big issue for us on our platform and the technology is how can we work to understand nudging behaviour? How can we, exactly as Helen says, how can we make it just part of the way we do business? This is what I was taught at M&S 20 years ago. I feel like an old man. It has to be a byproduct of doing business. It has to be a byproduct of doing business. Some of the stats on food waste are horrific. 8% of total food greenhouse gases comes from food waste. We know that the majority of that also comes from post-purchase in the home. So how can we talk to customers about reducing that? We've already seen some interesting trials. The charity, I think it's a charity, Hubbub, run by Truin, has done some interesting work in the UK using a very, it's all about the way that they've talked to the consumer. So instead of us just trying to promote something or offer it, they've talked about the end-to-end change in behaviour. Over the course of that trial that they ran, they saw a 76% reduction in waste. That's amazing. Now, it is small scale, but we've got to take lessons from that sort of trial to see if we can roll that into our platform and our technology to really change behaviour.
To add a few words here at this point, because I think we've got to wrap up sort of like now. Are you there, Jane? Are you muted?
Sorry, thank you. You were on mute or something at the beginning of that, I think, Martin, so I wasn't sure who you were addressing that to. So I think the message out of this is the commitment remains. The priorities and challenges have changed slightly as a result of COVID, but there is more consumer engagement. Maybe now is the right time to have a conversation and take consumers with us. Interestingly, some of the messages that Ipsos tested with consumers is the ones with a much higher emotive content were the ones that actually had most impact with consumers. So being able to say you were using ocean plastic really resonated with them, whereas saying that you were doing something that was carbon neutral just didn't mean a thing to consumers. So together, the weight of brands that are wanting to move forward, and by having consistent conversations with consumers and finding cleverer ways to do that, seems to be the approach that will bring us all the success we're all committed to.
Right. So just finally from me, just to wrap up, I mean, I would say one thing about the pandemic is it's probably taught us to look at the very fundamentals of the way all of this works, and whether the government reforms might go deep enough might actually be open to a bit of debate, depending how long this pandemic goes on for. I've got to say, this has been, in terms of debate and getting interaction between the participants, this is about the best format I think I've experienced since lockdown. So I am greatly appreciative to Easy Fares for having spent the time to sort of give us this format. I think it's worked absolutely superbly. So it goes without saying, we've had a fabulous panel, and thank you so much to Robin, Ian, Will, Helen and Julian. You've been absolutely brilliant, and it's been fantastic the way this has all come together. So it is greatly appreciated. In the normal course of events, there were a huge round of applause, and then we'd go to the bar. So all I can say is goodbye from all of us, and let's have a virtual drink. Cheerio for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks,
Bye.
Martin.